A planter's daughter stands at the chapel door while her father's voice cuts through the evening air like a whip crack. She steps forward anyway and kisses the man her father forbids, right where the whole town can see. Gasps echo off the chapel walls. Patrollers reach for their chains. But a little girl with perfect pitch notices something wrong: green wax on papers that should be sealed in courthouse red. In the family Bible's margin, faded ink holds a dying woman's secret promise. Storm clouds gather, horses thunder down muddy roads. The overseer waves forged documents while authentic papers hide in plain sight. A hymn becomes a map through flood and fog. The courthouse bell rings as truth and lies face off on the steps where justice hangs in the balance. When the sealed envelope breaks open and the real papers see daylight, when a father must choose between pride and promise, when love defies the law and a child's memory holds the key to freedom, will one kiss of defiance be enough to change everything, or will it destroy them all? The morning came grey as old pewter, with mist threading through the cypress knees down by the landing. Ruthie hummed under her breath while she stirred the bitter tonic willow bark and mint, the way old Zay taught her. The hymn came as natural as breathing. Asterisk, on Jordan's banks, the Baptist's cry announces that the Lord is nigh. Asterisk, her pitch was perfect, always had been. 8 years old, and she could match any note that rang through the quarters, any bird that called from the Spanish moss, any creak the ferry made when Josiah poled it across the dark water. That child got the music in her bones, Dinah had said just yesterday, watching Ruthie hum while she swept. Same way some folks got the sight. The tonic steam curled up sweet and sharp. Master Silas would need it for his morning cough, the one that rattled like dry leaves in a bucket. Ruthie dipped the ladle, careful, not spilling a drop. The kitchen smelled of lye soap and yesterday's cornbread, with that under-smell of river mud that never quite left anything on the plantation. Boot steps crossed the yard. The post-rider. Ruthie watched through the kitchen window as he handed over letters tied with brown string. Master Silas took them to the front porch, settling into his chair with the paper spread on his lap. One letter lay apart from the rest, sealed with wax that caught the grey light wrong. Not red, not the deep courthouse red she'd seen when papers came from town. Green. Sickly green, like pond scum in summer. Ruthie wiped her hands on her apron and carried the tonic out. Master Silas was reading, his face set hard as a split rail. The green sealed letter sat on the porch rail, wax cooling like a lizard's eye. Your tonic, Master Silas. He took the cup without looking up. Ruthie. Yes, sir. That letter there. You seen one like it before? She studied the seal. Wrong color, wrong shape, too pressed hasty, with one edge thicker than the other. No, sir, that ain't courthouse red. Master Silas's eyes flicked to her face, then back to the letter. He drank his tonic slow. You got a good eye for such things. Yes, sir. Go on then. But Ruthie lingered, humming soft. Something about that green wax made her stomach twist. In the quarters, old Zay always said the truth lived in small things, the way wax pooled, the weight of paper, the scratch of a quill when it told lies. That ain't the courthouse red, she whispered to herself as she walked back to the kitchen, watching the green seal cool like a lizard's eye on the envelope. By afternoon, the sun had burned through the mist. Ruthie was hanging wash when she heard Overseer Pike's voice carry across the yard, sharp and mean as always. Josiah, get them crates to the landing by dusk. Ferry's got to run twice today. Miss Eliza came out of the house then, carrying a cup of the willow tonic. She moved like a deer at the forest edge, careful, listening. 19 years old and pretty as morning light, but with something restless in her eyes that made the other plantation ladies whisper behind their fans. Papa's feeling better, she said to Pike, though she looked past him to where Josiah stood by the crates. Josiah was 24, with hands that knew every board of the ferry, every current in the dark water. He'd been born on the place, same as Ruthie, but where she was small and quiet, he was tall and steady, the kind of steady that made you feel safe just being near him. Rivers running high, Miss Eliza said to him, like asking about the weather. Yes, miss. Rain up river yesterday. Should settle by evening. Pike spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Don't need no weather talk. Just need them crates moved. Miss Eliza's chin lifted. Just a fraction. Papa wants to know about the crossing. For planning. That was a lie. Ruthie could tell by the way Miss Eliza's voice changed, careful and formal when usually she spoke plain. Josiah seemed to know it too. His eyes found Miss Eliza's face and held there a moment too long. "Ferry'll run safe, miss. Always does." Ruthie started humming again, soft as she pinned wet shirts to the line. The first verse of the hymn, same as she'd been humming all morning. Asterisk, "On Jordan's banks the Baptists cry." Asterisk. And Josiah, without even thinking, answered with the second line. Asterisk, "Announces that the Lord is nigh." Asterisk. It happened so natural, like call and response in Sunday meeting. Miss Eliza turned quick to look at him, surprise flowering in her face. Pike didn't catch it already, walking toward the tobacco barn, cursing about lazy hands and lost time. But Ruthie caught it. The way the music passed between them like a shared secret. The way Miss Eliza's breathing changed when Josiah sang. From down by the landing, the ferry horn moaned through the cypress long and low, lonely. Ruthie found its exact note with her hum, letting it carry through the wash-heavy air. Something was building. She could feel it in the music, in the wrong-colored wax, in the way Miss Eliza's eyes followed Josiah as he hefted a crate and walked toward the river. Sunday evening, at the country chapel, the air hung thick as honey. Service had run long, Preacher Amos holding forth on mercy and judgment, while the congregation fanned themselves with folded papers. Ruthie sat in the back with Dinah and the other house servants, listening to every word and remembering it perfect. Miss Eliza sat up front with Master Silas. She wore her blue dress, the one that made her eyes look deep as well water, and she kept glancing toward the door where light slanted gold through the opening. Josiah wasn't inside. Wouldn't be, not in the white chapel. But Ruthie knew he was near, probably waiting by the creek bend, like he did some Sundays when his ferry work was done. She could feel his presence the way she could feel a storm coming, something in the air that made her hum different. When service ended, folks moved slow toward the door. Sunday evening was for lingering, for talking about crops and weather, and who was courting who. Master Silas stood on the chapel steps, speaking to Judge Bell about tobacco prices. Miss Eliza stepped toward the door. Master Silas's voice cut sharp as a blade. "Don't you dare kiss that slave." Every person in earshot went still. The evening air seemed to hold its breath. Miss Eliza stopped in the doorway. Her hands were shaking, but her voice came steady. "Papa? You heard me, girl. Don't you dare." But Miss Eliza was already turning. Josiah stood just beyond the chapel light, where the path bent toward the creek, waiting like she knew he'd be. She stepped to the threshold, to the exact place where lamplight met darkness, where sacred ground met the world. And she kissed him, full on the mouth, where every person on the chapel steps could see, where Judge Bell could see, and Mrs. Whitcomb, and the Brennan boys with their patroller badges. She kissed him like it was her choice and hers alone, like love was stronger than law and twice as stubborn. The gasp that ran through the crowd sounded like wind through winter trees. Their lips parted to a chorus of whispers and the scrape of Patroller Hale's boot on the chapel floorboard. "Assault," Pike called it. He'd come running from the store where he'd been drinking, drawn by the commotion like a fly to spoiled meat. His face was red with drink and righteousness as he pushed through the crowd. Plain assault is what that was. Boy put his hands on a white woman. "I kissed him," Miss Eliza said, her voice carrying clear across the chapel yard. "It was my doing." "Don't matter whose doing it was," Patroller Hale said, stepping close to Josiah. "Boy's got no business touching quality folk. You got a pass, boy." Josiah stood straight, hands at his sides. "No, sir. Was on plantation duty." "Plantation duty," he says. Pike spat. More like sniffing around where he got no business. Ruthie moved through the crowd like a shadow, small enough to slip between bodies, quiet enough that nobody noticed. She pressed close to Miss Eliza's side, her hand finding the young woman's sleeve. Miss Eliza looked down, and something in Ruthie's steady presence seemed to calm her. The girl's humming was so soft it was barely there, just a thread of melody that wound around them like protection. "Josiah didn't do nothing wrong," Miss Eliza said. Her voice shook now, but she kept talking. "I chose. I kissed him because I wanted to." The crowd stirred like hornets. Judge Bell stepped forward, his face grave as winter. "Miss Talcott, you understand what you're saying?" "Yes, sir. And you, boy," he turned to Josiah, "you understand the position you're in?" Yes, sir. Ruthie felt the tension pulling tight as fence wire. In her mind, she saw the green sealed letter from that morning, the wrong color of the wax, the hasty shape of the seal. Something bad was coming. She could feel it in the music that wanted to spill out of her, not the sweet hymn from before, but something darker, more urgent. Well, Judge Bell said finally, I expect we'll need to sort this out proper. Come morning. At the courthouse. Pike's eyes glittered. Won't need no sorting. Boy stepped out of line. Law's clear on that. But Ruthie was thinking about the letter, about wax and seals, and the way truth lived in small things, about the hymn that had passed between Miss Eliza and Josiah like a promise, about the way old Zay always said, Child, when trouble comes knocking, you listen for the music underneath. Music don't lie. As the crowd began to break up, Ruthie hummed again, soft and steady, weaving through the evening air like a thread connecting all the scattered pieces of what had happened. Somewhere in that thread was hope. She could feel it, thin as spider silk, but strong. She just had to find the right song to make it visible. Later that night, after the house had settled and the last candle was blown out, Ruthie lay in her corner of the quarters thinking about music and memory. Old Zay was already asleep, breathing deep and slow. Dinah rustled in her bedding, murmuring dream words, but Ruthie's mind was wide awake, turning over everything she'd seen and heard. The green-sealed letter, Miss Eliza's kiss, the way Josiah had known the second line of the hymn, and something else, something tugging at the edge of her memory like a loose thread on a quilt. Ruthie sat up careful, not wanting to wake anyone. She closed her eyes and let her mind wander back through all the songs and conversations and small moments that had piled up like kindling in her perfect memory. There, 2 winters ago, Mistress Anne's sick room, before the fever took her. Ruthie had been carrying broth, moving quiet as a mouse. Mistress Anne was at the big wooden desk by the window, writing in the family Bible, not in the regular pages, but in the margin where the paper was cream white and unmarked. Josiah, she'd whispered as she wrote, her hands shaking with weakness. Free upon my husband's oath at Easter. Then she'd looked up and seen Ruthie in the doorway. Come here, child. Ruthie had set down the broth and approached. You remember things, don't you? Everything you see and hear? Yes, ma'am. Good. Mistress Anne had touched the page where the ink was still wet. Some things need remembering, even when folks would rather forget. Especially when folks would rather forget, Ruthie thought now, 2 years later. She'd never told anyone about the margin note, never had reason to, with Mistress Anne dead and Master Silas grieving and the household running on as usual. But now Miss Eliza had kissed Josiah where everyone could see. Now Pike was talking about assault and the law. Now there was a letter sealed with the wrong color wax sitting on Master Silas's desk. And somewhere in the big house, the family Bible sat on its stand by the parlor window, waiting. Ruthie lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she hummed so soft it was barely breath. The hymn that had connected Miss Eliza and Josiah, the one preacher Amos had taught them in parts, the one that mapped something more than just melody. Asterisk, on Jordan's banks the Baptists cry, announces that the Lord is nigh. Come then, and hearken to his voice, awake, ye saints, and rejoice. Asterisk. In her mind, Ruthie could see Mistress Anne's careful handwriting, could feel the weight of the secret she'd been carrying, without knowing it was a secret at all. Tomorrow would bring trouble. Pike would see to that, and Patroller Hale would help him, and the letter with the green seal would play its part in whatever scheme was hatching. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of the quarters, Ruthie held on to 2 things, the memory of words written in a Bible margin and the knowledge that music never lied, even when everything else did. Dawn crept through the quarters like spilt milk, grey and thin. Ruthie woke with the hymn still humming in her chest and a plan beginning to take shape in her mind. She found Dinah already in the kitchen, kneading biscuit dough with strong hands. You're up early, child. Couldn't sleep. Ruthie set water to boil for Master Silas's tonic. Dinah, you remember when Mistress Anne was poorly? Before she passed? Dinah's hands slowed in the dough. Course I remember. Why you asking? She used to write in that big Bible. In the margins sometimes. Woman had things to say, even when she was dying. Dinah shaped the dough into rounds. What's got you thinking about Mistress Anne? Ruthie poured hot water over willow bark, watching the steam rise. How to say it without sounding foolish. How to explain about the letter and the wax and the feeling that all the pieces were connected like verses in a song. "Ruthie?" Dinah's voice was gentle. "Something troubling you? That business last night, at chapel. Pike's fixing to make trouble for Josiah. Pike makes trouble for everybody. It's his nature. This is different." Ruthie strained the tonic, thinking about green seals and wrong wax. "Dinah, what if there was something written down? Something about Josiah that folks don't know?" Dinah stopped kneading altogether. "Child, you best tell me what's in your head." So Ruthie did. All of it, the margin note, Mistress Anne's whispered words, the feeling that the Bible held secrets Pike didn't know about. When she finished, Dinah was quiet for a long moment. Then she wiped her hands on her apron and took hold of Ruthie's shoulders. "You sure about what you saw? What you heard?" "Sure as my own name." "Then we got to tell somebody. Soon as possible." "Who'd believe us? Pike's got papers. And that letter yesterday, something about that seal ain't right. But who's going to listen to what a child thinks about wax?" Dinah nodded slow. "You need someone who knows about papers, about what makes them legal." She glanced toward the house. "Miss Eliza's got book learning, and she's got more cause than most to want the truth. You think she'd listen?" "Child, after what happened last night, I think that girl would listen to angels if they told her how to help Josiah." They found Miss Eliza in the garden, cutting roses for the breakfast table. Her hands shook as she worked, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Miss Eliza?" Ruthie approached careful, like she might a skittish horse. "Oh, Ruthie. Good morning." "Morning, miss." Ruthie glanced at Dinah, who nodded encouragement. "Miss Eliza, I got something to tell you. About Josiah. About something I saw before Mistress Anne passed." Miss Eliza's hands went still on the rose stems. "What kind of something?" So Ruthie told the story again. About the margin note. About "free upon my husband's oath at Easter." About Mistress Anne's insistence that some things needed remembering. When she finished, Miss Eliza sank onto the garden bench like her legs had given out. "You're certain? You're absolutely certain?" "Yes, miss. I got the kind of memory that holds on to things." Miss Eliza stared at the roses in her lap. "Papa never said anything, never even hinted." "Maybe he don't know," Dinah said gentle. "Mistress Anne was poorly for a long time. Could be she wrote things down, made promises that she never got to tell him about. Or maybe he does know," Miss Eliza said, her voice bitter as green persimmons. "Maybe he's choosing to forget." Ruthie thought about the letter with the green seal, the hasty way it was pressed. "Miss Eliza, there's something else. Yesterday morning, the post brought a letter, sealed with green wax, not courthouse red. Something about it looked wrong." Miss Eliza's head snapped up. "Green wax? What kind of green?" "Sickly green, like pond scum. And the seal was pressed hasty, all uneven." "Where is it now?" "On your papa's desk, last I saw." Miss Eliza stood up sudden, roses scattering to the ground. "Come with me. Both of you." They found Master Silas in his study, reading correspondence with his morning coffee. The green sealed letter lay open on the desk, and Miss Eliza's eyes went straight to it. "Papa, that letter there, may I see it?" Master Silas looked up, his face drawn and tired. "Why? Please, Papa." "It's important." He handed it over, reluctant. Miss Eliza read fast, her face going pale as milk. "This is from Pike. He's—" "Papa, this says Josiah is to be sold south by Friday. Pike has the authority to manage property transfers when I'm indisposed." "Indisposed? Papa, you're not dying. You have a cough." Master Silas's jaw tightened. "After last night's spectacle, it's clear the boy's gotten ideas above his station. Better to transfer him before there's real trouble." "Real trouble?" Miss Eliza's voice climbed. "Papa," I kissed him. "I chose to. How is that his fault?" "Enough." Master Silas stood up, his chair scraping harsh against the floor. "The matter's decided." But Ruthie stepped forward, small and quiet and steady. "Master Silas, sir? That letter's got green wax." "What of it?" "Courthouse papers come with red wax. Always red. This green seal. It ain't right." Master Silas looked at her sharp. "You're certain about the wax colors?" "Yes, sir. Seen courthouse papers before. Always red, never green." A silence stretched between them, thick as molasses. Finally, Master Silas took the letter back, studying the seal with new eyes. "Might be Pike used different wax," he said, but his voice had doubt in it. "Papa," Miss Eliza said, stepping closer to his desk, "Ruthie says Mama wrote something in the family Bible before she died. Something about Josiah." "That's nonsense." "Then let's look." Miss Eliza's chin set stubborn. "If it's nonsense, looking won't hurt." Master Silas stared at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the parlor window, where the family Bible sat on its wooden stand. The big book was bound in dark leather, worn soft from years of handling. He opened it careful, turning through pages of births and deaths and marriages recorded in different hands. But when he reached the margins where extra notes might be written, his face changed. There, in Mistress Anne's careful script, faded but still legible. Asterisk, Josiah Rivers free upon my husband's oath at Easter, witnessed by God and conscience. A.T. Asterisk. The silence that followed was deep as a well. "Papa," Miss Eliza whispered, "you knew, didn't you?" Master Silas's hands shook as he touched the page. "She was dying, fevered, I thought. I thought it was just the sickness talking. But," she wrote it down. She made it official. "A margin note isn't legal standing, Eliza. It's just the wishes of a dying woman." Ruthie felt her heart sink. But then she remembered old Zay's words about truth living in small things, about listening for the music underneath. "Master Silas, sir, what if there's more? What if Mistress Anne left other papers?" He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "What do you mean?" She was careful about writing things down. "Maybe she left something at the courthouse, something official." Miss Eliza caught on quick. "The probate records. When Mama died, there would have been papers filed. Inventory, debts, bequests." Master Silas nodded slow. "Clerk Avery would have the records, but child, even if Anne left instructions, I'd still have to agree to them. Still have to take an oath. Would you?" Miss Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. "If the papers are there, if Mama made it legal, would you honor it?" Master Silas looked at the Bible page, at his dead wife's handwriting, at his daughter's desperate face. The weight of the decision sat heavy in the room, pressing down like storm clouds. Finally, he nodded. "If there are legal papers, if Anne made proper provision, then yes, I'd honor her wishes." Ruthie felt the hymn start up in her chest again, soft and hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, the music would lead them true. The courthouse squatted on the town square like a brick toad, windows glinting in the morning sun. Ruthie walked between Miss Eliza and Master Silas, her blue ribbon bright against her dark skin, her memory holding firm to every detail that might matter. Clerk Avery was a thin man with ink-stained fingers and spectacles that slipped down his nose. He looked up when they entered, surprise flickering across his face. "Mr. Talcott, miss, how can I help you folks?" "We need to see the probate records for my wife," Master Silas said. "Anne Talcott, deceased 2 winters past." "Of course." Avery pulled out a thick ledger, pages rustling like dry leaves. "Anything particular you're looking for? Any mention of specific bequests? Instructions regarding property or personnel?" Avery's finger traced down columns of careful writing. "Here we are. Basic inventory, debts settled, household effects distributed." Oh, Miss Eliza leaned forward. "There's a notation here about a sealed codicil, filed separately, to be opened only upon your specific request." Avery looked up over his spectacles. "Never been opened, far as I can see." Ruthie's heart jumped. "What's a codicil?" "Addition to a will," Avery explained gentle. "Sometimes folks have second thoughts, want to add or change things. Can we see it?" Miss Eliza asked. "Certainly." Avery disappeared into the back room, returning with a sealed prost envelope. The seal was red, proper courthouse red and unbroken. Master Silas took it with trembling hands. Anne always was thorough. He broke the seal, careful, unfolded the paper inside. His face went white as he read, then flushed red, then settled into something between grief and resignation. "What does it say, Papa?" "It says," his voice cracked, "it says Josiah Rivers is to be granted his freedom upon my sworn oath, taken before witnesses at Easter or at my daughter's wedding, whichever comes first. It's signed, witnessed, and notarized." Ruthie felt the hymn swell in her chest, triumphant now, but Avery was frowning at something in the ledger. "Mr. Talcott, there's something else here. Another entry, filed just yesterday, a bill of sale for the same individual." The triumph drained away like water from a broken bucket. "Filed by whom?" Master Silas asked. "Your overseer, Caleb Pike, shows transfer of ownership to a buyer in Georgia. Price paid in advance." Miss Eliza's face went hard. "That's impossible. Papa hasn't signed anything. Says here he did. Signed and sealed, yesterday afternoon." Avery pulled out another paper. Green wax seal, properly notarized. But Ruthie was staring at the green seal, and something was singing wrong in her mind. "Mr. Avery, sir, can I see that seal close?" "I suppose." Ruthie studied it careful. The wax was the same sickly green she'd seen on the letter, pressed with the same hasty unevenness. "This ain't right," she said. "What do you mean, child?" "Your seals is always red, always, and they's always pressed even, careful like. This here's green and messy." Avery looked closer, his frown deepening. "You're right, child. This isn't my seal at all." He checked his ribbon drawer, pulled out a spool of red silk. "I only use red ribbon and red wax. Always have." The courthouse went quiet except for the scratch of Avery's pen as he made a note in the ledger. "Mr. Talcott," he said finally, "I believe your overseer has filed fraudulent papers. This green seal isn't official." Relief flooded through Ruthie like warm honey. The music had been right. Truth did live in small things, wax color, ribbon shade, the careful pressure of an official seal. But their victory was short-lived. Boot steps crossed the courthouse floor, heavy and purposeful. Pike stood in the doorway, his face flushed with drink and anger. Behind him, Patroller Hale fingered his riding whip. "Well, well," Pike said, his voice syrup smooth and dangerous. "Looks like folks been busy this morning." Master Silas straightened. "Pike, we were just reviewing some paperwork." "I bet you were." Pike stepped closer, and Ruthie smelled whiskey on his breath. "But see, that paperwork don't matter much. Boy assaulted a white woman last night. Witnesses seen it. Law's clear on what happens to boys who assault white women." Miss Eliza stepped forward, her chin raised, defiant. "I kissed him. It was my choice." "Choice don't matter, Missy. What matters is what the law says. And the law says that boy's mine to dispose of as I see fit." Avery cleared his throat. "Actually, Mr. Pike, about those papers you filed. Papers is legal and binding." Pike's hand moved to the pistol at his belt. "And that boy's coming with me right now." Ruthie felt the melody fracturing in her mind, hope splintering like glass. They'd found the truth, proved the codicil was real, and the bill of sale was fake, but Pike had the law on his side and a gun at his hip. "Please," Miss Eliza whispered, "please don't do this." But Pike was already turning toward the door, motioning for Hale to follow. And Ruthie knew that all the truth in the world wouldn't matter if they couldn't get to Josiah first. The hymn in her chest changed key, shifting from triumph to warning. Time was running out, and the music was telling her to run. The storm came up from the south like God's own anger, turning the sky the color of old pewter and setting the cypress trees to dancing wild. Ruthie crouched in the church basement with Miss Eliza and Preacher Amos, surrounded by dusty trunks and the smell of old leather. They'd run straight from the courthouse to the chapel, Pike's threats ringing in their ears. Now thunder rolled overhead while they searched through boxes of old papers, looking for anything that might strengthen their case. "Tell me again about the hymn," Preacher Amos said, his kind eyes focused on Ruthie. "The one you and Josiah were singing." "On Jordan's banks," Ruthie said, humming soft. "He knew the second line soon as I started the first." "I taught him that song," Preacher Amos said, thoughtful. "Taught it to all the young folks, but in parts. Different verses for different purposes." Miss Eliza looked up from the trunk she was searching. "What do you mean, purposes?" "Well," Preacher Amos glanced toward the basement door, making sure it was shut tight. "Some songs carry more than just music, if you take my meaning. Some carry instructions." Ruthie's heart jumped. "Instructions? About what?" "Routes, safe houses, signals." The preacher pulled out an old songbook, pages yellow with age. "See, On Jordan's Banks has 8 verses, but most folks only know 4, the others." "Well, They map a route north, to friends who help travelers. Travelers, Miss Eliza repeated, understanding dawning in her voice. Folks seeking the promised land, Preacher Amos said, careful. The hymn tells them which roads to take, which houses have lanterns in the window, which creek crossings run shallow enough to ford. Ruthie's mind was spinning. All this time, she'd been humming a map without knowing it. A map that could lead them to safety, to people who might help Josiah escape Pike's plans. "Can you teach me the other verses?" she asked. "Child, it's dangerous knowledge. If Pike or the patrollers caught you with it, they already planning to hurt Josiah. Can't get much worse than that." Preacher Amos studied her face, seeing something there that satisfied him. "All right. But you got to promise me this stays between us three. Promise." He opened the songbook to a hand-copied page. First 4 verses is about John the Baptist, like always. But verses 5 through 8, they tell a different story. Ruthie listened careful as he sang, her perfect pitch catching every note, her perfect memory storing every word. Asterisk, the crooked, straight and rough made plain. By Whitcomb's lantern, break the chain. 3 knocks upon the hidden door will lead to freedom's distant shore. Asterisk, Whitcomb's lantern, Miss Eliza breathed. The Quaker family, 2 farms over. And the hidden door, that's the root cellar behind their barn. 3 knocks, they know you're a friend. Thunder crashed overhead, shaking dust from the basement rafters. Ruthie could hear rain drumming on the chapel roof, hard and steady. "What about the next verse?" she asked. Preacher Amos sang it soft. Asterisk, when Jordan's waters rise too high, and patrollers block the moonlit sky, follow the gourd's bright handle round, to where the singing stones are found. Asterisk, singing stones? Creek crossing, about 3 miles north of here. Water runs over flat rocks, makes a musical sound. But only when the water's low enough to ford safe. Miss Eliza was on her feet now, pacing the small basement. "How do we get word to Josiah? How do we tell him about the route?" "Don't have to," Ruthie said, the understanding hitting her like lightning. "He already knows. That's why he answered when I hummed he knows the hymn means something more." Another crash of thunder, and then the sound of horses in the chapel yard. Preacher Amos blew out the lantern quick, plunging them into darkness. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Boot steps crossed the chapel floor overhead. Ruthie heard Pike's voice, loud and demanding. "Preacher." "You in there? Hide," Preacher Amos breathed. "I'll go up, try to lead them away." Miss Eliza grabbed Ruthie's hand in the darkness. "If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen. If it does, you remember that codicil. You remember what your mama saw in the Bible margin. You make sure folks know the truth." Ruthie squeezed her hand. "I will. But we ain't done fighting yet." The basement door opened overhead, and Preacher Amos climbed up careful. They heard his voice, calm and steady. "Evening, Mr. Pike. Nasty weather to be out riding." "Looking for a runaway preacher, boy named Josiah. You seen him?" "Can't say I have. Been in the basement all evening, searching through old papers. Mind if we look around?" "Course not, though I doubt you'll find much. Place is full of dust and old sermons." Boot steps moved across the floor above. Ruthie and Miss Eliza pressed back against the basement wall, barely breathing. After what felt like hours, the searchers left. Preacher Amos came back down with a fresh lantern, his face grim. "They're checking every building, every hiding place. Word is Pike's got papers saying Josiah attacked you, Miss Eliza. Claims you're too shaken to speak for yourself. That's a lie. Course it is, but Pike's got Patroller Hale backing him up, and folks are scared. They want the matter settled quick." Ruthie felt the hymn shifting in her chest again, urgent now. "We got to get to Josiah first, before they find him." "How?" "They've got the roads blocked. We use the hymn route. Go to Whitcomb's, get their wagon, find Josiah, and get him away from here." Miss Eliza nodded fierce. "Then what?" "We can't run forever." "No," Ruthie said, thinking hard. "But we can get to town, get to Clerk Avery, make him swear out the truth about the forged papers. Once that's official, Pike can't touch Josiah. It's dangerous," Preacher Amos warned. "If Pike catches you." "If Pike catches Josiah, he'll be sold south by morning," Miss Eliza said. "We have to try." Thunder rolled overhead again, and Ruthie made her decision. She started humming the first verse of the hymn, her voice carrying clear and true through the basement. Asterisk, on Jordan's banks the Baptists cry, announces that the Lord is nigh. Asterisk, Miss Eliza joined in on the second verse, her voice harmonizing with Ruthie's. Asterisk, awake, ye saints, and hail the day that takes our sins and fears away. Asterisk, and when they reached the fifth verse, the secret verse, the verse that mapped the route to freedom, Preacher Amos added his voice too. Asterisk, the crooked, straight and rough made plain, by Whitcomb's lantern, break the chain. Asterisk, outside, the storm raged on, but inside the chapel basement, three voices sang a map to hope, and the music promised that morning would come. The Whitcomb farm sat in a hollow between two hills, white house and red barn, glowing soft in the lantern light. Ruthie led Miss Eliza through the corn rows, following the hymn's instructions. 3 knocks upon the hidden door. The root cellar was behind the barn, just like Preacher Amos had said. Ruthie knocked 3 times, quick and light. The door opened to reveal Mrs. Whitcomb, a small woman with grey hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Children? What brings you out in this storm?" "Please, ma'am," Miss Eliza said. "We need help. There's trouble at the plantation, and we need to get to town." "Missus." Whitcomb studied their faces in the lantern light, seeing something there that convinced her. "Come in, both of you. Eli," she called to her husband. "We got visitors." Eli Whitcomb was built like a fence post, tall and lean and steady. He listened while they explained about Josiah, about Pike's forged papers, about the race to get the truth to Clark Avery before it was too late. "Where's the young man now?" he asked. "Don't know for sure," Miss Eliza said. "Hidden somewhere on the plantation, probably. Pike's got patrollers searching everywhere." "Mrs." Whitcomb put a gentle hand on Miss Eliza's shoulder. "Child, you can't go back there. Too dangerous." "I have to. Josiah's in danger because of me. Because I kissed him where everyone could see. Love ain't nothing to be ashamed of," Eli said quiet. "And helping folks escape injustice. Well, that's the Lord's work." He was already moving toward the door, pulling on his coat. "I'll take the wagon, follow the creek route toward the plantation. If I can find the young man, bring him back here." "What about us?" Ruthie asked. "You stay put," Mrs. Whitcomb said firm. "Get dry, get warm. When Eli comes back, we'll all go to town together." But even as she spoke, they heard horses on the road moving fast, coming closer. "Patrollers," Eli said, his jaw set tight. "They're checking every farm. Mrs." Whitcomb blew out the lantern quick. "Hide in the root cellar. We'll send them on their way." Ruthie and Miss Eliza huddled in the dark cellar, listening to boot steps cross the yard above. They heard Pike's voice, loud and demanding, and Mrs. Whitcomb's careful answers. "No, sir. Haven't seen hide nor hair of any runaway. Been inside all evening on account of the storm. Mind if we look around?" "Course not, though I doubt you'll find much. Just us old folks here." The search seemed to last forever. Finally, the horses moved on, and Mrs. Whitcomb came to let them out. "They're heading toward the Miller place," she said, "but they'll be back this way before long." Eli was already hitching up the wagon. "We leave now. Follow the creek route, stay off the main roads." "What about Josiah?" "I know where he is," Ruthie said sudden. "The hymn, the part about singing stones. He's at the creek crossing, waiting for the water to go down." Eli nodded. "Makes sense. Creek's running high from the storm, but it'll settle by midnight." They climbed into the wagon, Mrs. Whitcomb tucking quilts around them. The wheels started rolling, carrying them through the storm toward whatever waited in the darkness. Ruthie hummed soft under her breath, following the hymn's map in her mind. The crooked made straight, the rough made plain. The promise that Jordan's waters would part for those who had faith enough to cross. The creek was singing when they reached it, water rushing over flat stones, musical and wild. But the sound was wrong, too loud, too high. The storm had swollen the creek beyond what the hymn promised. "Can't cross here," Eli said, studying the dark water. "Current's too strong." "But the hymn says," Ruthie started. "Hymn was written for normal times." "This here's floodwater." Miss Eliza stood at the creek bank, her dress whipping in the wind. "Josiah! Josiah! Are you there?" A whistle came from the far side, low and mournful, like a ferry horn. Then Josiah stepped out of the cypress shadows, tall and steady, even in the storm. "Miss Eliza? That you?" "Yes. We have to get you away from here. Pike's got forged papers, claims you attacked me." "I know. Been hiding since sunset. Heard the patrollers calling my name." The creek rushed between them, dark and dangerous. Eli studied the current, measuring distances with his eye. There might be a ford upstream, where the creek splits around that big rock. They followed the bank, the wagon wheels sucking in the mud. The wind carried the sound of horses distant but getting closer. "They're following our trail," Mrs. Whitcomb said. At the ford, the water was shallower but still treacherous. Eli tested it with a long stick, shaking his head. Risky, real risky. But Ruthie was humming again, her perfect pitch, finding something in the water's song. A different melody, higher up the bank. She followed it, listening hard. "Here," she called. "There's a bridge here." They found it in a grove of willows, an old log bridge, half hidden by hanging branches. Narrow and slippery, but solid. Josiah crossed first, his long legs steady on the wet wood. Then he reached back to help Miss Eliza, their hands touching for a moment before she was safe on the near side. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank the child," he said, looking at Ruthie with something like wonder. "How'd you know about the bridge?" "Music told me," Ruthie said, simple. "Water sings different when it's running around something solid." They climbed into the wagon, all of them together now. Eli snapped the reins, and the mule started pulling toward town. Behind them, the horses were getting closer. But ahead, the first grey light of dawn was starting to show in the eastern sky, and in Ruthie's chest, the hymn was building toward its final verses, the ones that promised the crooked would be made straight, and justice would roll down like waters. The courthouse bell was ringing when they reached the town square, calling folks to another day of business. But the square was already crowded more people than usual for a weekday morning, all talking in urgent whispers. Pike was there, standing on the courthouse steps like he owned them. Behind him, Patroller Hale held a set of shackles that caught the early light. "There," Pike pointed as their wagon rolled into the square. "There's the boy who assaulted Miss Talcott." The crowd stirred, some folks stepping closer, others backing away. But Judge Bell was there too, and Clark Avery, and the sight of them gave Ruthie hope. "Hold on there, Pike," Judge Bell said. "Let's handle this proper." Miss Eliza stood up in the wagon, her voice carrying clear across the square. "Josiah didn't assault me. I kissed him. It was my choice, and I'd do it again." A gasp ran through the crowd. Pike's face went red as raw meat. "Girl don't know what she's saying. Probably threatened, scared into protecting the boy." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Miss Eliza climbed down from the wagon, Ruthie right beside her. "And I have proof that you've been filing false papers, Mr. Pike." That got the crowd's attention. Folks pressed closer, wanting to hear more. Judge Bell raised his hand for quiet. "Miss Talcott, that's a serious accusation. What proof do you have?" "Show them, Ruthie." Ruthie stepped forward, small and steady, carrying the family Bible like it was made of gold. She opened it to the margin where Mistress Anne's note was written, holding it up so the crowd could see. "My mistress wrote this before she died," Ruthie said, her voice clear as a bell. "Josiah Rivers, free upon my husband's oath at Easter." She signed it legal, and there's a codicil at the courthouse to match. Pike stepped forward, his hand on his pistol. "That's just scribble. Ain't worth the paper it's written on." "Maybe so," Clerk Avery said, appearing at the courthouse door with a ledger in his arms. "But this here's official." He held up the red-sealed codicil. "Filed 2 winters ago, signed and witnessed proper." The crowd murmured, sensing the wind changing direction. "Don't matter what old papers say," Pike snarled. "Boy's property, and property that assaults white folks, gets dealt with, according to law." "But what if he ain't property?" Ruthie asked, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "What if those papers you got is fake?" She pointed to the green-sealed document in Pike's hand. "That there's got green wax. Courthouse papers is always red, always. Mr. Avery can tell you." Avery nodded. "Child's right. I only use red wax, red ribbon. Have for 20 years. Pike's face was getting redder. "Wax color don't mean nothing. Paper's legal and binding." "Then you won't mind if we check the ledger," Judge Bell said calm. "See what's actually on file." "Course I mind. This is public business. Don't need no ledger checking. But Avery was already opening his books. Says here, Pike filed a bill of sale yesterday afternoon. But, he frowned, that's odd. Says here he also filed papers claiming assault and requesting immediate transfer of the prisoner. So both papers is filed at the same time, with the same green seal, but one's dated yesterday afternoon, the other's dated this morning. Avery looked up, his spectacles glinting. How'd you file papers this morning, yesterday afternoon, Pike? The crowd was getting restless now, sensing something wasn't right. Pike's hand moved to his pistol again. Don't matter when they was filed. What matters is the boy assaulted a white woman and needs to be dealt with. But Ruthie stepped forward again, and this time she started to sing. Soft at first, then stronger. Asterisk. On Jordan's banks, the Baptist's cry announces that the Lord is nigh. Asterisk. Other voices joined in Mrs. Whitcomb, Miss Eliza, even some folks in the crowd who knew the hymn. The music rose like a prayer, washing over the square, and in that moment of song, Master Silas appeared. He looked terrible, pale and shaky, leaning heavy on old Zay's arm, but his eyes were clear and his voice was strong when he spoke. Pike, he said, step away from the boy. Mr. Talcott, sir, you shouldn't be out of bed. You're poorly. I'm well enough to see what's happening here. Master Silas walked slow toward the courthouse steps. Well enough to know my wife's last wishes when I see them written plain. He took the Bible from Ruthie's hands, reading the margin note aloud so everyone could hear. Josiah Rivers, free upon my husband's oath at Easter. Signed by my wife, Anne Talcott. He looked up at the crowd. I stand here before you all, and I swear before God, and these witnesses I honor my wife's wishes. Josiah is free. The silence that followed was deep as a well. Then Judge Bell stepped forward. Do you swear this of your own free will, Silas Talcott? I do. Then by the power invested in me by the state of South Carolina, I declare Josiah Rivers a free man. The cheer that went up shook the courthouse windows. Pike made one last desperate grab for his pistol, but Patroller Hale, seeing which way the wind was blowing, stepped between him and the crowd. Easy there, Pike. Matters settled now. But it wasn't quite settled. Not yet. Ruthie tugged on Judge Bell's sleeve. Your Honor, sir, there's one more thing. What's that, child? Mr. Pike's been filing false papers, trying to steal Josiah away with forged seals. That's a crime, ain't it? Judge Bell nodded slow. Indeed it is. A serious crime. He looked at Pike, who was sweating despite the cool morning air. Caleb Pike, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and filing false documents. Hale, take him into custody. As Pike was led away in the same shackles he'd meant for Josiah, the crowd began to disperse. Some folks looked ashamed, remembering their eagerness to see violence done. Others seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted. But the best moment came when Miss Eliza took Josiah's hand, right there in the open square where everyone could see. Will you marry me? She asked, her voice carrying clear. Miss Eliza, it's legal now. You're free now. Will you marry me? Josiah's smile was like sunrise. Yes, ma'am, I surely will. And the cheer that went up then was twice as loud as before, full of joy instead of anger, hope instead of hate. The wedding blessing took place that very afternoon, on the plantation porch where the whole thing had started. Preacher Amos spoke the words simple and true, with the household gathered round and neighbors coming from miles away. Master Silas stood beside his daughter, his face peaceful for the first time in months. He'd given his blessing, signed the papers, and used his signet ring to seal Josiah's freedom documents with proper red wax. What God has joined together, Preacher Amos said, let no man put asunder. Miss Eliza Missus. Rivers now kissed her husband right there on the porch, in full sight of everyone who'd seen that first kiss at the chapel. This time, there were no gasps, no angry whispers, just applause that sounded like rain on a tin roof. Ruthie sat on the porch steps, humming the hymn that had carried them through storm and trial. But now the melody was different, not urgent or warning, but peaceful, celebratory. Mrs. Whitcomb appeared beside her with a small package wrapped in brown paper. For you, child, for everything you did. Ruthie unwrapped it careful. Inside was a new blue ribbon, bright as summer sky, with tiny silver bells sewn along the edges. It's beautiful, Ruthie breathed. You earned it, Miss Eliza Missus, Rivers said, kneeling beside her. You saved us all, Ruthie. Your memory, your courage, your music, you saved us all. She tied the ribbon around Ruthie's wrist, next to the old one. The bells chimed soft with every movement. Now you got two, Mrs. Rivers said. One for remembering the past, one for celebrating the future. As the sun set over the river, folks began to drift away to their own homes and their own lives. But the music lingered, drifting across the water like a blessing. Ruthie stayed on the porch, humming soft, while the newlyweds sat together in the swing Master Silas had built for his own wife years before. The ferry horn sounded from the landing, Josiah's replacement, taking the evening shift, and Ruthie found its exact note with her voice. Everything was different now. Everything was changed. But the music was the same, true and steady and strong. Ruthie, Mrs. Rivers called softly, "Thank you." "For everything," Ruthie smiled, her new ribbon chiming gentle in the evening breeze. "Just followed the music, ma'am. Music don't lie." From somewhere in the quarters, old Zay's voice rose in an old spiritual, and other voices joined in one by one. The plantation had found its song again, not the song of sorrow it had carried for so long, but something new, something that spoke of freedom and hope and love chosen freely. And on the river, the ferry moved back and forth in its eternal rhythm, carrying people from one shore to another, while the water sang its endless song beneath the stars. The lanterns were lit not as signals now, but as simple light against the darkness, warm and welcoming and peaceful at last.